July 11th, 1944. A German intelligence officer sits inside a stone farmhouse, 3 miles behind the front line in Normandy. Across the table is a prisoner, not a colonel, not a captain, not even a sergeant, a 20-year-old American private from the 29th Infantry Division. The German officer expects the usual interrogation: name, rank, serial number, maybe a few scraps of tactical information. Instead, something disturbing happens. The private starts describing not only his own mission, but the objectives of neighbouring units, the boundaries between battalions, the location of phase lines, alternative routes, contingency plans. The German officer is stunned because many German lieutenants don't possess this much operational information. How is it possible that a young American soldier with only 11 months in uniform knows more about the battle than professionally trained officers in the Wehrmacht? The answer reveals one of the most important and least discussed military revolutions of the Second World War. And it helps explain why Germany's army, despite possessing some of the most sophisticated military doctrine in history, ultimately lost to an American force that many Germans initially considered amateur. When people think about military effectiveness, they usually focus on weapons, tanks, aircraft, artillery, technology, but wars are often decided by something less visible: information. More specifically, who possesses it. By 1944, the German army and the US army had developed radically different answers to a simple question: how much should an ordinary soldier know? The German answer was straightforward: very little. The American answer became increasingly radical: almost everything. What emerged was a clash between two organisational philosophies. One concentrated knowledge at the top, the other distributed knowledge throughout the entire force. And when battlefields descended into chaos, as they always do, the results were dramatic. To understand why captured American privates were astonishing German interrogators, we need to go back 15 years before Normandy, back to a classroom in Berlin. Inside a military academy classroom, a German staff officer explains a doctrine that would become famous throughout the world: Auftrags tactic. For simplicity, let's call it mission command. The principle was elegant. Senior commanders tell subordinates what must be achieved. Subordinates decide how to achieve it. This doctrine encouraged initiative, flexibility, independent decision-making, and it became one of the foundations of German military success. But there was a catch. Mission command primarily applied to officers. The German army maintained a strong cultural separation between officers and enlisted men. Officers were educated to think. Enlisted soldiers were trained to execute. Non-commissioned officers occupied the middle ground. They were highly skilled combat leaders, experts in weapons, tactics, discipline, and battlefield execution, but they were not generally trained to understand broader operational plans. The entire system functioned like a sophisticated machine. Officers were the processors, NCOs were transmission components, enlisted men were the actuators. As long as the processes remained intact, the machine worked brilliantly. And for years it did. German victories in Poland, France, and the early years of the Soviet campaign seemed to validate the model. Then came the Eastern Front. Between June 1941 and December 1943, Germany experienced a catastrophe that received far less attention than the destruction of tanks or divisions. The loss of officers. Approximately 60,000 German officers were killed, wounded, or captured. To appreciate the scale, remember that Germany's pre-war officer corps numbered roughly 100,000. The Wehrmacht wasn't merely losing personnel, it was losing institutional memory, experience, judgment, the very people who carried operational understanding. The replacements often lacked the years of education and battlefield seasoning possessed by their predecessors. As casualties mounted, German reports increasingly described a recurring problem: units freezing when leaders disappeared, difficulty adapting to changing circumstances, a tendency to continue executing outdated plans, even after conditions had fundamentally changed. The system had been designed around intelligent nodes, but those nodes were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Germany still possessed excellent doctrine. What it increasingly lacked were enough trained people capable of applying it. Ironically, while Germany was discovering the vulnerability of concentrated knowledge, the United States was learning the opposite lesson, and it learned it the hard way in defeat. February 19th, 1943, Western Tunisia. Kasserine Pass. American forces encounter experienced German troops in one of their first major engagements against the Wehrmacht. The result is ugly. Over 3 days, American casualties reach roughly 6,300. More than 200 tanks are destroyed or abandoned. Units become disorganized. Communications collapse. Command structures break down. The battle exposes serious weaknesses in the young US Army. But unlike many militaries, the Americans respond with ruthless self-examination. Investigators study what happened. They interview survivors, they review after-action reports, and they identify a critical problem. Many soldiers understood their immediate task, but they didn't understand the larger purpose. When officers became casualties, subordinate units often lost the ability to orient themselves. They knew what they had been told to do. They didn't know why. As a result, once the original plan unraveled, many formations struggled to adapt. This realization triggered a profound change. American leaders concluded that battlefield resilience required more than brave officers. It required informed soldiers. Lots of them. The solution would fundamentally transform how information flowed through the US Army. The United States faced a unique challenge. Its army exploded from fewer than 200,000 personnel before the war to more than 8 million. Training cycles were compressed. Basic training often lasted around 16 weeks. Promotions happened at extraordinary speed. By 1943, nearly 40% of NCOs had risen rapidly from civilian life. By the end of the war, that figure approached half. America couldn't create a traditional professional military elite quickly enough, so it did something different. It distributed knowledge. Instead of concentrating understanding in a small number of officers, the army began pushing operational information downward, far downward. The key tool was the 5-paragraph field order: situation, mission, execution, administration, command, and signal. The format wasn't new. What changed was who received it. Information that once remained at higher headquarters increasingly reached platoons, squads, and individual soldiers. Then came sand tables. Soldiers built miniature battlefields using sand, rocks, sticks, and string. Entire operations were explained visually. Objectives, routes, terrain, adjacent units, contingencies. Everyone could see the plan. Everyone could understand the larger picture. The philosophy eventually became summarized by a simple concept: every man a leader. Not because every soldier would command, but because every soldier should understand enough to continue moving toward the objective. When leaders disappeared, the US Army wasn't creating miniature generals. It was creating redundancy, an engineering solution to battlefield chaos. This brings us back to Normandy, summer 1944. German intelligence officers repeatedly encounter something unexpected. Captured American enlisted men possess extraordinary amounts of information. Privates can explain company objectives, platoon routes, battalion intentions, adjacent unit missions. Some German interrogators initially suspect deception. Perhaps the Americans are spreading disinformation. Others fear a security breakdown. Why are these soldiers talking? But the truth is more interesting. The Americans weren't revealing secrets they shouldn't know. They were revealing information they were intentionally taught, because the US Army had concluded that understanding the plan was itself a combat multiplier. The private sitting in that farmhouse wasn't exceptional. He was functioning exactly as the system intended. In a sense, every soldier had become a sensor. If something diverged from the plan, he could recognize it. If communication failed, he still possessed context. If leaders disappeared, he still understood the objective. Operational awareness wasn't concentrated. It was distributed, and that difference would become visible on battlefields across Europe. June 6, 1944, D-Day, Omaha Beach. The German defences are formidable. Concrete bunkers, interlocking fields of fire, pre-registered mortar targets, machine guns covering open stretches of sand. Among the units assaulting the beach is E Company, 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division. The opening minutes are devastating. Officers are hit. Command structures fragment, the kind of decapitation that should paralyze an attacking force. Yet something remarkable happens. Small groups continue advancing. Sergeants and NCOs reorganize survivors. Men from different units combine into improvised teams. Among them are leaders like Staff Sergeant Philip Stretch. They push inland, they locate objectives, they bypass obstacles. They continue executing the mission despite catastrophic disruption. Why? Because many of them had already seen the plan. They had studied terrain models. They understood where they were supposed to go. The loss of officers was tragic, but it wasn't fatal to the operation. Knowledge survived. Because knowledge existed in hundreds of minds instead of a handful, the assault adapted. The Germans, meanwhile, encountered a different challenge. Their defensive system depended heavily upon officers coordinating responses. When unexpected developments emerged, adaptation became more difficult. The battlefield was demonstrating an uncomfortable reality. Distributed understanding could sometimes outperform concentrated expertise. Then came the greatest challenge. December the 16th, 1944, 5:30 in the morning. The Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge. Approximately 200,000 German soldiers attack across an 80-kilometre front. The surprise is immense. Communications collapse. Headquarters lose contact. road networks clog. Nearly 7,000 Americans from the 106th Infantry Division are captured during the opening phase. This is exactly the type of chaos that should favour Germany, and initially it does. But then the American system begins showing its strengths. Small units establish roadblocks, improvised defences emerge, disrupted formations reorganise themselves, soldiers operate with incomplete information, but retain a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, higher headquarters begin responding, and one episode perfectly illustrates the advantage of distributed understanding. December 19th, Verdun. General Eisenhower meets senior commanders. The crisis is obvious. The Germans have ruptured the front. A major response is needed. General George Patton makes an extraordinary promise. He says his Third Army can pivot north and attack. Fast. Very fast. Many commanders are sceptical. Moving an entire army under winter combat conditions should take much longer. But Patton had done something important beforehand. He had ordered contingency planning. Potential courses of action had already been studied, briefed, discussed. The understanding had cascaded downward through the organisation. When the final order arrived, it wasn't creating comprehension, it was activating comprehension that already existed. The order functioned like a trigger, not a lecture. The result became one of the most celebrated operational manoeuvres of the war, and it reflected the same principle visible in Normandy. Speed comes from shared understanding, not merely from issuing commands. The fascinating thing about this story is that neither side was entirely wrong. German mission command remains influential today. Modern militaries around the world still study it. Its emphasis on initiative was revolutionary, but Germany faced a problem of scale. The doctrine assumed a sufficient supply of highly trained leaders. The war consumed those leaders. America confronted a different reality. It needed millions of soldiers, quickly. Instead of relying exclusively on elite expertise, it created organizational resilience through information sharing. One system concentrated knowledge, the other distributed it. When plans worked, both systems could be effective. When plans collapsed, the difference became decisive. The question wasn't who possessed better doctrine. The question was, where did the doctrine live? Inside a few critical minds, or spread throughout the force? And by 1944, German interrogators were discovering the answer firsthand, every time they questioned an American private. So why did captured American privates sometimes know more than German lieutenants? Because the US Army deliberately designed them to. After painful lessons like Kasserine Pass, America transformed operational knowledge into a shared resource. Sand tables, 5-paragraph orders, contingency briefings, distributed understanding. The goal wasn't to make every soldier a strategist. It was to ensure that the mission survived when leaders didn't. Germany's army relied on brilliant officers. America increasingly relied on informed soldiers. And when the chaos of war shattered communications, killed commanders and destroyed plans, the side that had spread knowledge across millions of minds gained a powerful advantage. In the end, the interrogation in that Normandy farmhouse wasn't revealing a security failure. It was revealing an organizational revolution. A revolution where information became as important as bullets, and where a 20-year-old private could help explain why one army adapted and another gradually lost the ability to do so. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And let us know in the comments, do you think modern militaries still benefit more from concentrated expertise, or from distributing knowledge to every level? Thanks for watching.